Hey, Tejas. Well, I heard the recording in progress message, so I guess everything started correctly.
Yeah, that's great.
I think we'll
Well,
just give it a few seconds while the participants are filling up here.
yeah,
Yeah, so I was saying it was like 85 degrees in Chicago on Saturday, and then it snowed this morning.
it's typical Chicago weather.
When did you get back into town?
Last night, so when we left, last week, there were like no leaves on the trees, and then you come back,
Hmm.
everything's bloomed and coated with snow.
Hmm. Yeah, spring is here. Okay, so we just a bunch of people have piled in here to the room. So why don't we get started, Tejas? So hello, everyone who has joined. My name is Anthony, and this is Tejas. We're going to introduce ourselves in just a second. In terms of sort of setting the stage for what we have planned for today, the plan is we're going to do some intros, then we're going to discuss and describe the problem that Truleo solves. We're going to spend a lot of time on that problem and what the opportunity is. Right around the 30-minute mark, I'm going to cruise around the product, so you'll see how Truleo actually works. We've got a login to our demo environment, so we'll show some publicly available videos. You'll be able to see how the AI classifies and labels a lot of this video. And then after the product demonstration, we'll have a little bit of a QA, and we'll end on time and get everybody out of here. So Tejas, do you want to kick us off with just an intro?
Yeah. So my name is Dr. Tejas Shastri. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer here at Truleo, and I met Anthony, almost 9 years ago, when at a hackathon when he was starting to ideate on Green Key, our previous company, and the two of us coming together, I think really was a great partnership. I saw a lot of drive and ability to navigate opportunities in Anthony, and myself, my background's in machine learning, AI, uh, and I come from a very technical background, and I love building technical solutions for problems. And so, um, super fortunate to have met Anthony and for us to have worked together for so long. Um, at Truleo, I lead the development of really our entire platform from a technology perspective, everything from the data science and models and machine learning all the way through the product that you'll see today. And so, happy to answer any technical questions or any questions around the technology we use as you guys have them.
Thanks for that, Tejas, and for the kind words. And I recall just like a little bit of your background. I want to dig in a little bit more. You grew up in Peoria, Illinois,
Hmm.
school in
Yeah.
Iowa, and you're married with two kids now.
Yes.
You just got back from Disneyland, so
Yeah.
you're fully rested and probably need a vacation from the vacation.
Indeed. Yeah. Two young kids under the age of 6, so it's a handful right now.
And Tejas, you're a two-time founder. Um, anyone that's dug around probably has heard of Ampy, the company you founded prior to Green Key. Sorry, you're a three-time founder. What was Ampy? What were the problem that you were solving there?
Yeah. We had an energy harvesting technology that we were working on commercializing, and this was the time when the wearables industry was blowing up, around 2013 or so, and we were trying to help power a lot of those wearable devices from energy harvesting, from kinetic energy if you're wearing them. And we had some success in raising some money. We had a successful Kickstarter campaign. We started growing, what was a hardware company and brand. It was a good, learning lesson for me. I was CEO of a first-time CEO of a hardware company, and there was a lot that I didn't know, and I learned a lot from that process, especially around, finding good strategic partners. And eventually, one of our strategic partners was interested in acquiring the brand, and they were much more successful at taking hardware technology and expanding it more than me. And after that was when I met Anthony. After Ampy, and maybe that's a good segue to AT and your background and
Yeah.
how we first came together.
Appreciate that. Yeah, you mentioned AT. That was my badge on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade. So my background is quant finance, machine learning, wrote trading algorithms at a young age, started writing trading strategies at 15, started trading on the floor at 21, and founded Greenkey at 30. I founded Greenkey with Tejas because I wanted to transcribe and analyze all of my different counterparties. And that led me into natural language processing, where again, I met Tejas at a hackathon and was really attracted to Tejas's creativity and the ideas he had around NLP and really the future that he saw in NLP and basically structuring unstructured data and how that will provide the interface to machines. A lot of what we're seeing now, there's so much buzz around chat GPT and NLP and structuring unstructured data. We've been doing this, I guess, for 10 years now, Tejas. So my responsibilities at Truleo, I'm the CEO, which really means I'm a glorified salesperson. I focus a lot on sales on a commercial side of our business. I focus a lot on PR, strategy, top of funnel. I love top of funnel. I'm really trying to increase and grow awareness of Truleo as quickly as we can. And so I work a lot with the sales and marketing team, and Tejas is over on the product success and support team. So Tejas, I wanted to start with like maybe discussing why did we found Truleo? You know, what was a problem set that attracted us?
Yeah, sure. So, Anthony and I, if you've looked at our background and what we did at Greenkey, we were working with a lot of tier one Wall Street banks, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America. And we were structuring all of their conversational data, so voice, chat, and email. And the purpose of it and really the value it provided them was to understand how to create better salespeople. These banks have clients that are, hedge funds. They have counterparties. They're all competing with each other. They all really want to have the best salespeople. And there's so many insights you can pull from their conversations that they're having with the other side to improve the quality of service of that interaction. And, we were doing this at Greenkey for quite a while. But, Anthony and I, like many of you on this call, probably saw a lot of events that happened over the last few years. We watched the murder of George Floyd. We watched really the increasing tensions between police officers and police departments and the communities they serve, the waning trust in police that a lot of urban areas had. And we really looked at it through the lens of what we saw in finance. In finance, there was a similar shift in mentality from the sort of Wall Street trading floors of the 90s that are glorified in movies to the level of professionalism that happens now that's much higher. And we knew that body cameras existed, and we were sort of shocked to find out that less than 1% of that video is ever reviewed. And the opportunity to take natural language processing, AI, be able to automate analysis of that data, we just saw it as a huge opportunity. And the first question we asked was, why isn't anybody doing it? And similar to what we saw on Wall Street, there were several reasons why nobody was doing it. It's noisy and jargon-heavy environments. There's a huge problem with separating speakers out of a body cam video. So if you can't understand who the officer wearing the camera is and who the civilian is, who another officer on the scene is, it becomes impossible to really get any meaningful insights out of it. And we'd solved a lot of those problems at Greenkey. And so we saw this opportunity in this new industry, but it was a new industry. And we were a fintech company, and it's sort of hard to take that company and pivot it and turn it into the right solution for public safety. And so luckily we had some opportunities to sell that company and really grab some of the best and brightest from our Greenkey days and the Greenkey team and start Truleo. And Anthony, I don't know if you want to fill in any of the blanks there.
Yeah,
that origin story.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about because as I always say, like the number one decision any founder or entrepreneur is going to make is deciding which problem to solve. It really is everything. Warren Buffett has like the famous saying, it doesn't matter how hard you row, it matters which rowboat you pick. And everything is easier in Truleo than at Green Key. The one big thing I think of right away, Tejas, is cloud, right? So all of this data is in the cloud. There's very few, less than 1% for sure, of on-premise installations that we come across because cameras are relatively new. It's modern technology, modern web stacks, all the data is in the cloud. Number two, you don't have to change any user workflow, right? The patrol officer, he just docks his camera, he or she docks his camera as normal, and that data is processed in the cloud. So I really like that it's cloud. There's no change in user workflow. The viral coefficient super high, meaning policing's very herd mentality. There's certain departments that are influential and leaders, or certain chiefs that are leaders. And if you do a good job for a very small group of departments, they will tell others. And so that coefficient is probably 10 or 20, meaning we do a good job for one department, we're going to get 20 more just on the reference, the client testimony of that one department. So it's a problem where the product quality and the service quality matter, which, as opposed to Wall Street, you do a good job for JP Morgan, which we did, and they just smother you with NDAs and paperwork, and they don't tell anybody else about it. And they don't allow you to tell anybody else about it. So the other thing I like, Tejas, about this problem is that, Brooks' law says that, the more bodies you add to solving these complex problems, right, you just increase complexity, and there's an optimal number of people or bodies to solve certain problems like this. And so this is a very difficult problem to solve, which is to diarize officer and civilian audio. And so for us, it's a big advantage. It doesn't matter how big these other teams are, how much money Microsoft and Amazon's and the other transcription providers of the world have. If they were to try to build and compete with Truleo, they would build a team exactly the same size as Truleo. It's not something you could throw money at. These are very intense problems that require a lot of research and expertise to solve. And so I liked that we would be competing what seemed like on a very fair level playing field. So Tejas, I want to talk a little bit about the why trust in the police is low, and what we've seen from departments. And again, this is just my opinion, but I think trust in the police is low because supervision is low. And supervision is low because the middle of the departments are gone. Okay, so when we go into these departments, they're very barbell shaped, meaning you've got men and women that are there for 20 years. They're hanging on, they're a few years away from their pension, and they're just sort of in their command level positions. And what's gone are the supervision layers, the folks that have been there for 5 years or for 10 years, for lots of different reasons, which we'll get into. Policing is not a profession they wanted to stick around anymore until they left. And so the department's really scrambling to hire new officers. And so they try to incentivize communities with sign-on bonuses and other things that attract young kids. And so when we go into these departments, something like between 50 and 70% of the department, depending on the department, is they have 3 years or less on. Okay, so very, very young police departments in the United States right now. And so in my opinion, they're full of risk, right? Because you got young, inexperienced kids, they're cops, and there's not a lot of supervision. And so this is really a big problem we solve, is that trust is low because supervision is low. And part of what Truleo does is to help automate supervision, and we help facilitate coaching. And so the product, as you'll see, and I'll cruise around, it really is designed for the sergeant. It's designed for the sergeant who's in charge of 8, 9, 10 human beings, called he or she squad. And it's designed so that the sergeant has some idea of what's going on in those interactions each day. And Truleo will surface the most interesting interactions, meaning if there's use of force or noncompliance, pursuits or frisking, sort of the riskiest, most critical interactions, to make sure that your squad's doing a good job. So everyone always thinks of like body camera analytics, and they go right to like the negative of mitigating risk. And certainly you can do that with Truleo, and you should do that with Truleo. If you have unprofessional, risky behavior, that's something Truleo is going to make super easy to mitigate, to identify, And then the sergeant needs to have a conversation with that officer and say, hey, we don't talk like that. We always treat people with respect, and you want to change the language. But on the flip side, when you surface these insights, one of the things we saw right away, Tejas, was that over 95% of these interactions are professional. You know, there are interactions where the chief of the command staff would be proud if that was on the news, for example. And so we became excited that Truleo, which is a mashup of trust and Leo, could surface truth no matter what that was.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I think for a lot of these sergeants, one of the things to remember is that many of them were officers, young officers not that long ago. They might have only been on the force for a handful of years. And they're definitely from younger generations now. They're more tech forward, and they're used to platforms to automate their workflows. And I think the same type of automation we see from people wanting to go to chat GPT and be able to use that to augment what they're doing in their daily life, we see Truleo's platform as being an opportunity to do that. These are the areas that are hard or painful to do or hard to find time to do, to train and coach your force, but you need to do it so that you do a good job, you keep getting promoted, and Truleo's there to help those sergeants and really elevate them with a technology platform that can basically be their assistant.
So Tejas, a lot of people might ask, like, what is the FBINA? There's the logo on our website. We've got this on the domain menu. I've got a plaque behind me. Really, what the FBI National Academy is, it's a school at Quantico that selects basically a fraction of the top 1% of police each year. And you're in the command staff and you get selected and you go live at Quantico for 3 months. And you go through specialized training, very similar to a special agent. And the hope is that you come out of the department and you then you come out of the academy and then you teach your department, what you've learned. So in my mind, the FBINA, it's the top 1% of policing. It's Top Gun school for command staff. And so what we did was we went and partnered with these folks as we were founding and building the company and building our models. And we said, help us and show us what's in this data. Why does professionalism matter? And can it be deconstructed? And so, of course, all of this is on our website, and we're purposely doing this presentation through our website so that anybody listening can go to our website and get rehash, sort of what we talked about. And what we learned was that the language matters. And I'll try to summarize, Tejas, exactly what type of insights we surface and why, and then I'll let you go into sort of the data science behind this. So what Tejas and I discovered is that a couple of things. Basically, the more professional you are in your interactions, the less non-compliance you're going to have, and obviously then the less use of force will occur. Now, this is across all interactions, all neighborhoods, all shifts, male, female, it doesn't matter. The more professional the officer is, the lower the non-compliance rate will be. Thus, the lower the use of forces will occur. And so what do we mean by professionalism? Number one, it means not using insults, threats, or directed profanity. And a lot of cops, I think, are surprised by this because I think they have bad habits. I think they're taught to, when they give commands, to inject certainly profanity or maybe some insults or threats. And I'm going to tell you a couple of reasons why that doesn't work. Number one, the data shows that an officer who doesn't use that language doesn't have a less compliance rate than an officer that does. So it's ineffective. So, when the FBI that now has cameras, when they go into a room, they say hands, hands, hands. They don't shout, a bunch of profanity and insults and threats, because that's turning on your emotional brain, and they want folks thinking logically. The other big reason is it looks terrible. The optics of it in court with a judge or a jury, it looks horrific. The officer looks angry, out of control, and emotional. So insults, threats, and profanity, it's unprofessional, and we're big advocates of, like, there's literally no upside. It doesn't get you better compliance. Uh, that's false, and officers shouldn't do it. But the other thing about being professional, really the key insight, I would say the alpha, right, from having a trading background, the alpha is the more explanation an officer gives, the better the non-compliance rate will be. And just anecdotally, the perfect example would be something where an officer asks someone to put out a cigarette. And this is up on our screen here. The difference is, hey, dude, put out that cigarette. That's not going to get you the best reaction over time. What would be better is giving explanation to say, hey, the reason we want you to put out that cigarette is sometimes people try to hide alcohol in their breath. We want to make sure that's not what you're doing. When Tejas saw explanation in the data sets, the non-compliance rates were extremely high relative to an officer who doesn't give explanation. And so this was the aha moment for Tejas and I to found Truleo, to put the product centered around giving explanation. It's the key thing that you have to do to get a highly professional interaction. All your other interactions are just going to be standard professional. And if you use insults, threats, and profanity, you're going to get an unprofessional mark in Truleo.
Yeah, and just to clarify on that, so everybody's clear, because I know we use a lot of terminology. So there's compliance, which means that the community member or civilian is complying with the officer. And then there's non-compliance, which is what we label, which is basically that they're not being cooperative, they're escalating the interaction. And so that higher explanation gives you better compliance. It also lowers your non-compliance. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And when you think about, okay, explanation is actually one of the tenets of procedural justice. If you've heard the term procedural justice, it's been studied, and it's part of the academic body of policing for the last almost 20 years. And basically, procedural justice is a set of principles that can bring about better outcomes for police and community members. And providing explanation and treating people with respect is one of the big tenets of it. And it's one of the ones that's most measurable from language. One of the things about giving explanation that and Truleo's ability to measure it that's so unique is that a lot of times people compare us to other transcription engines. And a typical transcription engine on body-worn camera video will give you a blob of text, and it might tell you, hey, this is speaker 1, this is speaker 2, but I don't know who the officer is. So the first step of finding explanation is understanding which speaker is the officer and which speaker is the civilian. Another thing that's common is that, if you have transcription, you might think, I just want to see if my officers are swearing. You could probably do a keyword search for, the F word or the N word and find instances where those are present or not in a transcript. But when it comes to finding explanation, there's not one single keyword that indicates explanation. Explanation could be, I'm stopping you because, or the reason I need you to do that is so that you can have XYZ. So there's such a variety of language that can be indicative of explanation and good explanation. And it really requires sort of modern approaches to natural language processing that are able to really account for the variety of language patterns. It's not as simple as just searching for keywords. And that's one of the big reasons why Truleo has such a big competitive advantage in this space, is because we do have that modern technology stack. We do have those modern natural language processing architectures that allow our models to really understand this statement that this police officer said is indicative of explanation, or this statement is indicative of non-compliance in the same way. There are so many instances where it sounds simple to detect, and then the wealth of possibilities is so broad that you really need modern approaches to do it.
The example I always give, because people get hung up on this, because transcription is like 30-year-old technology, and syntax parsing and keyword searching, it's got to be 15 years old now. A really good example, and the reason why it's not simple keyword searching, a good example would be a lot of non-compliance we see, Tejas, is the officer having to repeat themselves. It's not any one thing that the subject or the civilian said. It's the officers obviously having to repeat themselves over and over that indicate to us that some level of non-compliance is occurring. So Tejas, I want to touch upon civilian privacy. very quickly, because this was really at the heart of how we designed the product and the workflows. A lot of people maybe don't realize this, but I would say over 1,000 police departments today transcribe all their body camera data. And I think this is a big problem for them. And I think they're going to have to change the way they do this. And the example, or the reason why, is because we're seeing so many laws be created that are protecting civilians' PII, civilians' personally identifiable information, especially in California, where I think there's multiple bills that are out to be voted on. And the reason why that's a problem for departments right now is if you're just transcribing everything and you can't separate who's the officer from who's the civilian, you're really not going to be able to do certain things like auto redaction to hide or remove any civilian PII. And this is an area where Truleo shines, because we're big believers in protecting civilian data. We architected our product to do this. We think it's the right thing to do. We think it's the standard. We think all transcription providers should do this. And Tejas, I wonder if you have anything to add here in terms of maybe the officer ID and exactly how the technology works.
Yeah, there's multiple layers to how we do this. And number one is really focusing on the interaction at hand. If you've ever gone on your iPhone and gone to maps and looked at your location, there's a little blue bar that sort of shows which way you're facing. And that's sort of an example of how our transcription works. Our transcription focuses on the conversation that an officer is having with the direct people interacting with them. And this is really important because one of the biggest privacy concerns for civilians is sort of like accidental surveillance. And so the people interacting with the officer are obviously involved in that interaction, but somebody on the sidelines over here that's not even involved in the interaction, a normal transcription engine might pick that up. And that, number one, makes the transcript very hard to read because you have all these words that are interjected from the side conversation. But number two, you're effectively bringing in this extra source of information from a party that really had no ability to consent to that interaction. And so through a combination of how we do audio processing and how we train our models, we're able to have interaction-focused transcription. And that means that we can look at just the conversations that the officer wearing the camera is having with the many people they're interacting with. The second is our ability to identify the officer. And so every department that onboards with Truleo, our models will automatically look at all of the videos from each officer and identify the common speaker, and then create a video fingerprint. And then that video fingerprint for that officer can be used to identify that officer in subsequent videos. And so this really allows us to just focus on, did the officer wearing the camera, were they professional? Did they have risk? And that officer too doesn't have to worry if somebody else, some other officer on the camera was maybe using risky language. It's going to get attributed to that officer on their video rather than the person wearing it. And this also allows us to really pull out that civilian data, and so we can actually hide that civilian data. Some departments basically want their sergeants to only be able to view what the officer said and not be able to see civilian transcription. But then, of course, there's a third layer, which is personal identifiable information. So even if you're just looking at officer transcription and what the officer said, that officer might be repeating names, repeating addresses, repeating social security numbers, license plates, whatever type of personal identifiable information. And Truleo's models can go and we do redact that automatically. And that redaction is done in a way where it never actually becomes part of the transcript. So you can't go and search for it. You can't go and maliciously try to look up an interaction where you knew that there's somebody that gave some personal identifiable information, and it really is able to protect civilians and ultimately protect officers as well, and protect officers from making sure that their words are the ones that are attributable to them.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about commercial strategy, and then we'll go into the product demo and then finally Q&A. So we just signed Anaheim Police Department. You can read about that on the news link here. But this Truleo, what's interesting is it's a complex sale. There's multiple stakeholders. We interact a lot with chiefs of police, obviously, but also mayors and city managers and elected officials. There's so much overlap between when body cameras first came onto the scene 10 years ago. They weren't widely liked or adopted by police departments. It was really elected officials that brought them to police departments. And so today, a chief might choose, a camera because it's got certain features, but they were not the purchaser, 10 years ago. And today with analytics, we see a similar dynamic. We're building trust and doing a good job for our departments, and those client testimonials and those references are everything to us. And we feel strongly like everybody wins with Truleo. Everyone wins. The department wins because the vast majority of the interactions are positive and professional, and they want to be able to show that to the community. The officer wins because these analytics can help with wellness, morale. Suddenly they're getting attaboys for doing a great job, whereas today no one recognizes any positive interaction. It's all negative skew. They only get recognized if something poorly happens. The community wins because if there is risky officer behavior, that will get mitigated. The community will know for sure which percentage of officers are professional and why. And so everyone wins with Truleo. And our goal is to evangelize that and to explain to as many elected officials as possible. And so the whole reason we're doing crowdfunding is because we want to have the community help us increase awareness. If you've got elected officials or chiefs on the fence, for us, it's not anything nefarious why they're on the fence. People are busy. There's, status quo is powerful. People can be lazy and they don't want to try or use new technologies. And so we have to create a sense of urgency, create a sense of demand, and let chiefs and elected officials know that the public wants this, that this is good for the department, it's good for the public, and that the public wants it. And so that's the idea behind crowdfunding, is to activate a group of Truleo ambassadors. And one of the ways we do that is if you invest $500 or more, you get this FedEx perk. And what that is we're going to send a FedEx package to your mayor. We're going to send you an e-signature, and you're going to sign something, and then that package will go to your mayor, advocating on behalf of getting analytics in your town, and there'll be some sales collateral attached to that. The reason we like this FedEx strategy, it's something that we've done. We send a lot of physical mail. We find that physical mail is more effective than email in public safety. A lot of these folks are only in the office for a short period of time. Their inbox is flooded. They're not. Email has a much lower open rate than, for example, our bifolds or FedEx packages or the physical mail that we send in these departments and lawmakers. We also put calls in these departments and lawmakers. All of their information is publicly available. So it's really ripe market for SDRs, for example. We have an SDR making calls in these departments, getting between 10 and 15 bookings per week for just one salesperson. So increasing awareness is super important to us, and it's the reason why we're doing crowdfunding. Tejas, anything to add there before I cruise around scope?
No, that's definitely it.
Okay,
You know, if you are interested in seeing our campaign page, I think you can click on that Invest in Truleo button on the top right of our website. But yeah, let's dive into product, and then I know there's already some Q&A, so we'll get to that right after we cruise around the product a bit. And feel free to dump questions in the Q&A as they come up, and we'll answer them shortly.
Yep. So I've logged into what we call Scope, which is the Truleo front end. And again, the way that the technology works, the officers dock their cameras, the data flows up to their cloud evidence environment. It could be Axon's environment, it could be Motorola's environment. Those are the two primary cameras we support. I think in May, LensLock is releasing their API. We're camera agnostic, doesn't matter to us, but the camera provider needs to have an API. And between Axon and Motorola, my guess is that's 95% of market share, but we're open and able and willing to support other camera manufacturers as well. So once that data hits that environment, the environments stream us audio to our GPU containers, and there we transcribe and analyze right? Summarize, label, organize the data so that this front end, like a dashboard, visualization, search and query, can look and make sense of that data that's in a database owned by the police department. So it's very important to mention that we just get an audio stream. We don't analyze video. We don't retain anything. So we don't have this data. No court can compel us for this data. The data is put into a database that's owned by the department. And then the department logs into this environment to view that data. So right now I'm logged into my sales environment. It's a bunch of dummy data, dummy officer names. The way this would work is if I were the sergeant, I could click around here and maybe look for interesting events that took place, a pursuit, a use of force, some non-compliance or frisking. It's really trivial for us to offer more events or more labels, so we're happy to. It's just that these are the four that it seems like the vast majority of the departments care the most about. You got to remember that an officer's day, it's not that interesting. 95% of their interactions are taking statements from witnesses and victims. They go to domestics and they fill out reports. So if there is a pursuit or use of force, it's interesting. And as a sergeant, I want to be able to click into that and say, show me what happened. So I want to make sure that the language and tactics that my officers use are professional. So here I'll click into pursuit and I'll be immediately sorted into these videos where some pursuits occur. And so if I click into the video, I can go to the pursuit label. It's just like Netflix. I could just be taken right to it.
Heading down the alley.
Okay, so I'm taken right to the pursuit, and now I'm going to go check out some non-compliance and see what happens.
All right, put your hands up. I got him in the yard. Put your hands up. Put your hands up, sir.
Okay, so this is a good example, Tejas, of non-compliance where we can tell that the officer is repeating commands, and eventually there's going to be a use of force. And here I can look and I can see there's some language about taser being deployed.
Sir, I'm gonna tase you, taser.
Okay, so there's the taser deployed. I won't play the whole use of force, but this video is super clean, meaning I look up on the top, I've got no officer risk. Some events occurred. I reviewed a 9.5-minute video in less than 1 minute. Let's go to something where we want to search for like officer professionalism, for example. Here I've sorted by some officer professionalism. We'll click in this one here and see what's going on.
We're just gonna hang out just for a little. We got to figure it out because we just got to figure out what happened because we're talking to the witness now. We're just gonna see what they have.
So this particular video, I've got high officer professionalism because there's no risk, there's no insults, threats, or profanity, and the officer is giving explanation. And so let's go to an unprofessional interaction. Here I've got officer that's using directed profanity, insults, and threats, and we'll see what's going on in this one. Let's see here.
Man, I don't got shit. Get out of the ground, nigga. I play no fucking games with you, boy. All right.
Okay, so I think everyone gets it. I'm not going to play that whole video because it's filled with officer directed profanity, insults, and threats. But that's really what Truleo allows you to do. It allows you to quickly identify interesting events, whether officers had highly professional, standard, or unprofessional language during those interactions. Tejas, anything you want me to click on or I've missed within my calls? Anything come to mind?
I think one thing that might help, in fact, answer some of the questions that are coming in as well is some of these labels on the top here: complaints, non-compliance. So, the way we thought about building this application is really making it like email, making it a familiar interface for officers. And just like email, you have your inbox. It sort of shows you, and you can sort of self-direct where you want to go. But there might be particular inboxes like you have in Gmail where whenever something matches a certain filter, you want to be alerted. And that's really what these top inboxes do. You can basically set any terminology. So some of the default ones that come out are complaints and non-compliance. So if we find that somebody's talking about filing a complaint, that's a popular alert that people want to have just so that they can go and make sure, get ahead of any complaints that might be filed. Same thing with non-compliance. Non-compliance is something that a lot of departments want their officers to be able to review themselves. And so we can basically alert them anytime they have those videos with significant non-compliance, they can go review and self-assess, sit down with their supervisor and figure out, what could have gone better. This relates to one of the questions that came in, which is, does Truleo flag for the absence of language in certain encounters? And the answer is yes. So because of our ability to search and filter, we have a rich variety of ways to search. If you click that question mark icon at the top next to the search box, it'll show, a little bit of it. But there's an entire set of ways to be able to search and filter videos. And it allows you to search for things that exist or that don't exist. So you can search for non-compliance, but lacking another event. And that really allows you to do things like, search for encounters where maybe arrest was made, but we didn't see certain language for Miranda rights. And really gives you the power to not only look for things that happened, but look for things that you expected to happen, but didn't. And, this relates to sort of the second question as well. We do work with Axon and we use their API. In fact, the majority of our customers, I think, are Axon customers right now. The biggest differentiator from us and Axon is, number one, our ability to actually identify the officer speaking. And if you don't do that, you just have a blob of text and it's pretty worthless to be able to surface anything from it. And the second is our ability to actually use natural language processing to identify these types of events rather than just keyword match. And this ability to really do those things, it sounds simple at first because it's easy for humans to differentiate an officer and it's easy for humans to identify these things, but it's challenging for machines to do it. And our differentiation from Axon is one of the primary reasons that customers buy our product, and they use it alongside Axon Performance. So Axon Performance, they still use it to make sure that people are turning on their body cameras and that their body cameras are working. But when they want to actually do video review, as opposed to the random, select 5 random videos and see if anything interesting happened, more and more departments are preferring, Truleo's approach, where if you're going to spend 20 minutes reviewing videos, we can take you through 5 or 6 of the most important videos that have relevant events, and you can get a quick understanding of what happened. And all of that is available sort of within this My Call screen.
Yeah, Tay, just going further along the questions, there was a question about the potential headwinds for growth and solutions for growth. And one of the potential headwinds is just like the lack of federal funding around a product like this. If you look at what happened with body cameras, they initially came out and there's a bunch of criminologists that studied the impact of those cameras. And there was a large decline in some use of force and certainly civilian complaints. And I would venture to say the vast majority of cops today, they like cameras. And the number one reason they like cameras is they believe cameras get rid of frivolous complaints or lawsuits. So more often than not, the cameras protect the officers. And I suspect analytics will do the same because, again, 95% of these men and women, they're doing the right thing every day. And so if I'm a good officer, I want analytics. I want to show my community, my family, my department that I'm a good officer and I'm doing the right things for the right reasons. But over time, what happened was the federal government, the DOJ, created a lot of grant money, billions of dollars of grant money for body cameras. And some of that money is still available today because only about 80% of police departments have cameras. And so I think the same thing's going to happen with Truleo. If you look at our strategy and what we're doing right now, we're spending a lot of time embedding criminologists into departments. So we've got a criminologist going into Anaheim, another one going into Aurora. That data is how laws get changed. That data showing any change in officer behavior, any increase in professionalism, any decrease in noncompliance, all of that data is super important for us to get federal grants created. And so I believe that's going to happen. I believe that's the solution to funding headwinds. A lot of times if a department says, oh, we don't have the funding, for me, that as a salesperson, I think that's a no. And I'm trying to get around that. So funding is used as an objection a lot or an excuse. But in some departments, it's real, especially it depends on the department, how the size of the department, but it can be real. And so we want to eliminate that excuse with federal grants. There's another question, Tejas, around, being in a small town. And should FedEx packages be sent to their small town mayor or of a bigger town? I'm all for the town you're in. It doesn't matter to me how big your department is. We have a department in Pennsylvania that's 9 officers. And it really, to us, it doesn't matter the size of the department. It's a client reference. And you could have a chief of police. I'll give you an example. Chief Truver in Castle Shannon, Pennsylvania. He's the chief of a small department. I think it's like 15 sworn or so. But he's also the former president of FBI NA. And so he's nationally known. He's very influential, very well liked and respected. It's for us, it's not the size of the department. It's really just comes down to a client reference. And so let me jump back into the product, Tejas, and then we'll get back into Q&A because we still have some time left.
Yeah, definitely.
So I ended the last video with an unprofessional officer who was creating a bunch of risk with their language. Let's say I wanted to know if this officer is an issue or a problem. I could simply click on that officer and look at some period of time over 365 days. And a lot of times we get called the sort of baseball card stats for cops because of this screen, this dashboard. This is super powerful for a sergeant to be able to group their officers together to see how's my entire squad doing. It's powerful for a chief to group the department into precincts to get a sense. This is sort of how this video game works. I always call Truleo like a game. We're really trying to gamify policing. If you don't use insults, threats, or profanity, you will get a standard professional rating. It doesn't matter what the event is, because you could be highly professional and have a use of force. Those things are exclusive, and we'll look at those things exclusively. Truleo is all about measuring what the officer can control, which is he or she's language. No matter what's happening, they should be professional and respectful. Now, you can find out how much non-compliance a certain officer has. That's indicative. It could be an issue or problem. You could have 10 officers all in the same neighborhood on the same shift, but one officer's non-compliance rate is super high. As a sergeant, I would want to look into that and try to figure out why. Is the officer rude, sarcastic? Does the officer, what type of behavior, if any, is the officer displaying where he or she's ineffective? And so so pulling and teasing out those non-compliance rates and uses of force, it's helpful, but it's not what we're focused on. We're focused on officers' language, being professional or unprofessional. And so let me end there, Tejas, and go back to these questions. We've got a question from Roger. Could or would Axon or Motorola build a Truleo competitor? Sure, they can attempt to, they can try. When Tejas and I founded Truleo, you have to, we knew Motorola and Axon prior to founding Truleo. So part of what we need to do is assess our competitors' strengths and weaknesses, and the likelihood that they'll do something. And so, Truleo is validating a category. And I think the question really comes down to, like, are you guys defensible? If I invest in you, what's to prevent Axon or Motorola from just blowing you away with a better product or service? I think that the science behind what we do is super difficult. And I'll give you an example. We sold to JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citi, RBC, Jefferies. These are very smart people. They're much bigger organizations than Axon. They're very smart, highly paid folks there, but they couldn't create a similar product. Instead, they were our customers. And why is that? It's what I mentioned in the first few minutes of Brooks' Law. These are problems that you can't just throw money at. You need to build a very specialized team. And so far today, Axon and Motorola don't have those teams in place where they've got, a large natural language processing team working on diarization. It doesn't mean they can't do that in the future. but we'll do our best to remain partners with Axon and Motorola and others camera providers, because we think we're going to provide the best quality product and service. And we think departments are overwhelmingly going to choose Truleo. Anything to add there, Tejas?
I think the important thing to remember too, especially with natural language processing, is that the advantage of being a large company is that you can invest in research and development and throw resources at early research and development projects.
Mhm.
And then after things exit that early R&D phase, then it really comes down to product innovation. And that's where typically larger companies are slower. What we've seen in natural language processing over the last 10 years is that the community has become very open source. And so you might have heard the term large language models. Everybody is using them. Everybody has open source versions of them that then they fine tune to their domain. And so a smaller company can benefit from a lot of those advantages, but then we can take the data sets we've developed, we can take the know-how of our unique challenges for our environment and use those to iterate quickly. So, this sort of goes on to the next question. When we look at where we're going to innovate, it's really on our ability to understand this domain. It's to continue to improve that accuracy of identifying and pulling apart speakers in a messy scenario.
Mhm.
It's our ability to continue to improve the natural language processing and the number of labels that we add. And each one of those labels opens up new market segments. So,
Mhm.
requests for medical attention is another label that, county sheriff's office have talked about for opening up, analysis of body cams in correctional facilities.
Mhm.
Then there's abilities to then take that to adjacent areas like 911 analytics and things like that. And so, I really see us, because we're not a body cam manufacturer, we're a software company. So, and we see that our ability to measure professionalism, measure quality of service, and be able to do that in these, noisy public safety environments has applications outside of just, body worn camera, expanding into those other industries. And that's really where I think the growth opportunities are and why we're well set up for it.
Tejas, you might laugh at what I'm going to say. That I remember in banking, like Goldman would ask us if we want to sign an NDA. We just weren't fans of NDAs because as a startup, it could cost you 10 or 20 grand in legal fees just to get an NDA signed with a customer who may not turn into a paying customer. So Tejas and I felt strongly that it's only worthwhile working on things that are hard to do, and because you can create defensibility by being an expert at very difficult problems. And so we just weren't a big fan of like signing these NDAs. And we used to say, we stole the line from the TV show Billions. There's a famous line there that if just because you watch Kung Fu movies doesn't make you Bruce Lee. And so we're happy to talk about our, strategy and some of the places that we're taking the product, because it's difficult to execute. And so for us, it's better to tell our customers, like, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're planning. We're not afraid of, some competitor listening and, us giving them ideas. And so this is related to Stan's question, which is like, given the NLP differentiation, what functions do you expect to offer or to leverage that NLP advantage? One of them is training, Stan. We're hugely excited about the training aspects of Truleo. And pretty soon here in the next couple of weeks, you'll see a training curriculum be added to our website. And I'll tell you why this is such a big deal. Right now, today, if you're an officer, your department has to get Truleo for you to access it. But very soon, you'll be able to access it, because police officers have tons of training requirements. They have to get post accreditation. They've got to keep up 20, 40, 60 hours a year. And so Truleo is becoming an accredited platform where an officer is going to be able to log in, pay a tuition fee, and get exposure to NLP and be able to see how this works. We'll ask them questions and surveys, and we'll get their feedback on the different videos that they're watching. What should the officer have said? How do you feel about what this officer did? Is this a good example of explanation, for example? And so we're really excited about Truleo being a training platform to those officers and those departments that aren't yet customers. We think that's going to be a really good way to acquire customers and to get our sort of flywheel up and running and moving. Roger asked a question about who gets access to the data. We don't. There's a lot of debate over like who owns this data. And I was on CNN last week and they asked me this question, who owns this data? And I want to give you my opinion. Number one, it's certainly not the body camera providers. Okay, these cameras are a lot of times funded by taxpayers through grants and other through city budgets. And so I think that the camera manufacturer simply captures and stores the data. I don't think Truleo owns this data either, or any other analytics provider. I think that the department is the custodian of this data, and but ultimately, the analytics and the analysis, all of this stuff, I think, is eventually owned by the taxpayer. Now, what we see is that the data stays at the department. They use it for training purposes, and as of right now, they don't give access to folks with it. But what I think is going to happen is I think that this analysis, this performance metrics, I think it's absolutely going to become part of union negotiation, discussions over city budget and how much budget police departments get. There'll be benchmarks and goals and milestones set over these performance analytics. I think that will happen over the next 5 years.
I just want to add to that question because I know part of it was asking about academics. So we do have several academic studies going on at some of our departments, and those academics work closely with that department to the department being the custodian of the data to get the data that they need to do those studies. And so the custodian of the data is probably the right term right now. That depending on the department and what their goals are, they may provide that data to academics. They might provide that data to their own community in certain ways, and it's really at their discretion at this point.
A lot of departments, they view the data as a liability, and that's the wrong way to view this data. And once you surface the insights and show departments how this data can be used for wellness, morale, recruiting, retention, help the department tell their story, they start to look at this data as an asset, and they start to care less and less about who has access to it or can see it. We've seen that with a number of our customer departments. And that brings us to the last question here, which is what kind of departments do you find are early adopters? Are there patterns? Yes. So we're targeting roughly like 6 states right now with our physical mail, top of funnel activities. Essentially, they're blue progressive states. We're targeting, California, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, maybe a little bit of Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota right now. And that's primarily it. We have to focus on segmenting out those early adopters, and they're departments that are they're urban or suburban departments. And so we're not focused in, rural communities right now. I think it's going to take years for a product like Truleo to go into those type of communities. It's very similar to how body cameras, again, there's so much parallel between body cameras 10 years ago to analytics today. I think we're going to follow the exact same path of starting in cities and departments where trust is low. Now, what I'm looking for when we speak to a department, you have to realize like the number one thing I'm trying to do is get them to say no. I'm trying to disqualify them. We've got a lot of qualifying questions from our SDRs before meetings even get booked, but I'm trying to eliminate departments so we don't waste time. An early adopter is a chief that's a change agent. They're innovative. They want to try new technologies. They're open-minded. They are not a chief, for example, who's going to be retiring in 6 months and just wants to get out of the department and collect their pension. We're looking for high energy folks who are excited about what this technology can do for the profession. And so we spend a lot of time trying to qualify, our early adopters and segment them out. And I think if you look at every single one of our customers already, these chiefs are leaders. They tend to be well known throughout the industry. They're leaders, they're influential. And we think, again, it's going to be like a dam. There'll just be we'll just keep adding 2 departments, 3 departments a month, and eventually that dam's going to break. And suddenly the equation will be, man, if I don't get Truleo Analytics, what's my mayor, my city manager going to say? Tejas, we're right at time there. Anything you want to add before we close out?
No, I think we covered a lot of good areas. I know we'll be having some follow-on webinars as well, for other topics that we're diving into. But thank you for everybody for joining, and excited to have everybody who's here and who's watching, learn about our mission and potentially join it.